Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño and today we are discussing a topic: is a good camera more important for a beginner or for a pro? How this all got started was that I was hanging around with this really cool person. Her name is Alicia. And she invited me to lunch to talk about work-related things. And we were there discussing, among many things, photography came up. And she made an interesting comment. She said, Juan, I would think that a really good camera would be more important for a beginner than it would be for somebody like a pro. And I thought about it for a second and I said, you know what? I think I agree with you. And I think this is a great opportunity for a video. So we both got really excited and here we are. Now we're going in no particular order, but we're going to cover 7 reasons why a really good camera might be more beneficial for a beginner. Let's get started. Number 1, knowledge of equipment. A pro photographer simply knows how to use their equipment better. Now, I don't know where my mind is. That probably didn't come across the right way to some people, right? I know how to use my equipment. I digress. So typically, right, for photography equipment, a pro is going to know how to use their equipment a little better than a beginner. A pro is going to put their camera in manual mode for the most part. And they're going to maximize the design and the limitations of the camera. And by doing this, what they're doing is they're minimizing the difference between a really good camera and just an okay camera. A beginner, on the other hand, is probably going to put their camera in automatic. And at that point, it's more important to have things like high resolution, good color science, right? All these little features that make pictures look better, right? And the high resolution is good because if they don't crop properly, they can do that later in post-production or in editing. Reason number 2, a pro photographer is just going to have better glass and more of it. So let me give you an example. And this is funny because I speak because I'm kind of teaching on this channel, right? I put myself in the place of a pro because I've been shooting for 40 years, but that doesn't really make me a pro, right? I think the experience that I have maybe lends itself to that, but I never really did a photography, course like at a school, I learned in the School of Hard Knocks, right? Especially with film. It was actually, I think, a good way to learn, right? Because you weren't seeing what you were getting, so you had to take notes and you had to be diligent, slow down a little bit. So here we are, right? So I'm going to put myself in the place of a professional, but take that with a grain of salt. So going back to that, right? I have 3 different camera systems, actually 2 different camera systems, and then Fuji and Canon, right? And Canon is an SLR, DSLR, digital SLR. I also have an SLR. But definitely I still use my DSLR, right? My 5D Mark III. I use my Fujifilm, right? My GFX 100S. And then I have a whole bunch of old vintage lenses for film cameras. And the cool thing that I'm about to tell you is, and hopefully it'll open up your mind to some ideas here, I bought adapters for all of my cameras so that I can use these other lenses with them, right? So for my Fuji camera, I have an adapter where I can use my Canon EF lenses from my Canon 5D Mark III, a DSLR. I can also use those Canon lenses on my small mirrorless camera, which is my M6 Mark III, which I used to film these videos with, and I'm not currently doing it anymore. I have another camera here. But then I have these old film lenses, right? This is a film camera, right? This is my Pentax 672, and I can take the lenses from this thing, and with the mount, I could put it on my Fuji and take some amazing pictures, right? So knowing all these things, I have access to all this glass, right? All these lenses that really didn't come with my Fuji. Right, my Fuji, I have 2 Fuji lenses and then a lens that was made for that camera that's not Fuji. So really just 3 lenses. But when you add up all my Canon EF lenses, all these vintage lenses that I have, and maybe some other lenses that are neither vintage or Canon that I can use on that camera, I probably have about 10 lenses to 12 lenses total that I can use with that Fuji camera. So it opens up my door, right? A beginner is not going to know that. A beginner is going to buy a camera with a kit lens or whatever lens, and they're going to feel restricted to that lens. So it's going to be a lot more important for them to have a really good camera where the lens gives them a little versatility. A professional photographer can use an older camera, right? Even like this film camera from the 80s. You know, we can use an old camera because we have access to all these lenses that we can put on these cameras through adapters. I hope that was long enough for you. Let's go to number 3. And number 3 is basically just better vision and composition. And I don't mean 20/20, right? That's not the reason I have glasses, for better vision. What I mean by better vision is knowing what to look for, and then composition, knowing how to frame it. I give the example all the time about the tour bus that stops and everybody gets out and looks in the same direction, right? And a professional photographer may look at the same mountains, but they may frame the mountains a little different. While everybody's taking a really wide shot of all these mountains, somebody that's got a little more experience because they've done this a bunch of times, right? If for no other reason, they're going to point their camera in a different direction. They might even do like a telephoto shot of a part of the scene, not the entire scene. Or you might find a more experienced photographer, that way I keep away from the word pro, looking around, and they may find a hole in a tree where they see some movement, and then they go over there with their camera and they see a bunch of baby squirrels. And then they take the winning picture of the day, right? When everybody gets back and starts sharing pictures on the bus, this is the only person that got a picture of baby squirrels making sounds, which you can't record on a film camera, you know, on a still camera. But this is going to be an awesome shot that nobody else got, right? And back to the beginner, right? The beginner is going to follow the crowd, right? They're going to get out. They're going to point their camera where everybody's kind of pointing, where everybody's looking. I see this in the cities all the time where I'm shooting. I'm walking around, especially like New York City, which is where I've spent most of my time shooting street photography, and my daughter will point that out to me. I got an itch in my nose. I'll stop and I'll look up at a corner of a building somewhere, and then I'll start framing a picture, and then she'll start smiling when I look down at her, and she won't say anything. And then I'll say, what? And she's like, I'll tell you in a second. And then, a couple of seconds go by, and she's like, after you went and pointed your camera in that direction, everybody that was coming behind you that had a camera did the same thing. It's funny, right? Because they look up, they wonder what you're looking at, and then they see, oh my gosh, I didn't see those 4 flags up there with that funny Christmas tree hanging out of that building. That's a cool shot, right? So those are the things that people that have been shooting for a while are looking for. And digressing a little, we see this in the world of everything, right? I look at this neighborhood, for example, where I live, and everybody drives the same car. Everybody's now buying Teslas because all the other people in the neighborhood have Teslas. So these are the people that have no clue about cars. They're just doing it because everybody else is doing it. And these are the beginners, right? In the world of cars, these are the beginners. They have no clue. They don't know how an engine works. They don't know how to fix a car. They don't even read about cars. They're just buying it because the assumption is if everybody's buying one, it's got to be good, right? And it's a terrible way to live. You definitely want to do more research than that. And you don't want to buy a car just because everybody else is buying one, right? And I have nothing against Teslas. I think they're good cars, but everybody can't have a Tesla. Read the science reports and you'll know why, right? Because there has to be a balance, right? There has got to be a balance of gas and electric, otherwise the world will fall apart with either one of those standing alone, right? So there's got to be a balance, like everything else in life. So in the photography world, we'll go back to the beginners, and the beginners are doing it because everybody else is doing it, right? So that's not a good reason, but it's the way we all started, right? And that's how you learn. You get back, you look at the pictures, and the second, third, fourth trip, after getting the same pictures that everybody else that you know got, you start to say, it would be nice if I could do something a little different. So that is reason number 3. I'll finish by saying, back to point number 3 here, that even if the subject is good, the framing is bad, right? So that was the first point, right? Not knowing what to frame. You may see a beautiful subject, a beautiful scene, and just not framing it properly is going to get you a picture that's not as good as if somebody else who has experience just knows exactly where to put that camera. Especially if they know they're going to get black and white, they're already thinking in black and white. They know what makes a good black and white picture, so they point their camera, to where that's going to give them a good black and white result, which most of the people on that trip aren't going to be able to do. They may take just a general picture, turn it into black and white later, and it's really not going to be that impressive. Reason number 4, additional tools. So what do I mean by additional tools? These are like the peripherals, right? Things, well, gadgets that you can add, like for a camera, right? You're talking about filters, cleaning equipment, tripods, what did I write down? Lights, right? So a professional photographer is going to have more of these things, right? Because we've been around doing this a lot longer, right? So you have all these cool things, right? And it makes a camera, an older camera, it starts to make it behave a lot better, right? When you have a sturdy tripod, for example, you might get a beginner with a really chintzy tripod. I had a tripod when I was, 20 years ago. The camera would start sinking in the tripod because it was too heavy for the tripod. And the tripod had been around for a few years, not very long, but it was a crappy tripod, right? So these are the kind of things that beginners kind of deal with, right? So you end up not getting really good pictures. So good equipment, right? A good camera is going to help, because if you have more megapixels, if you're able to get good colors, if you're able to, the example I'm giving here with the tripod is not going to be the best one for this, right? But a person that's starting out with a really solid camera is going to be able to get by not having some of these nice gadgets that professional or experienced photographers have, right? I can take my Canon 10D, which was my first digital camera back in 2003, 6 megapixels, and I shot a bunch of weddings with it. And I can go take pictures with it now because I still have really good lenses for that DSLR system, right? The ones I use on my 5D Mark III, the same lenses I had back then. So I can put these lenses and I'm still going to get gorgeous pictures, right? And we'll go into other topics soon of why those pictures are going to look good as well, right? But I can start using lights, really cool filters. I can use all kinds of things that are going to make that old camera, 20-year-old digital camera, behave like a really, really fancy high-end digital camera today that a beginner would buy, right? And the beginner is going to crank out basic pictures in automatic while I'm going back 20 years with this camera, putting all these cool things on it and getting probably slightly better pictures than this beginner. So I can level the playing field just by having these cool, as I call them, additional tools. I hope that makes sense. Because now we're going on to reason number 5. And reason number 5 is just basically better knowledge of software. What do we mean by software? Computer? Well, I'm talking the editing suites, right? Like Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One, and endless other suites that are out now that you can get for either free or very cheap, right? So a pro, an experienced photographer, has been using these things probably a lot longer. Not everybody, right? There are exceptions to every rule. But they've been using it around, probably a lot longer. And even if they don't get the best picture possible because they're shooting on an older camera they decided to use, they can go sit on their computer, and I've done this. I've shot, even with good cameras, just a picture that didn't turn out as well as I thought because I was looking at a little screen. I get here and the lighting's not quite right. The color of the lighting isn't right. The intensity of the lighting isn't right. And maybe it's a little soft. And I can spend a little time on the computer with these editing suites and I can fix it, right? A beginner is either not going to have the knowledge or not going to have the money to buy these things, or and when I mean knowledge, I mean the knowledge to use them, but they may not even have the knowledge that these editing softwares exist and can do these adjustments, right? They probably know about light and cropping for the most part, but there's so much other stuff you can do with software these days, and beginners aren't going to know that, right? So I'm going to go out there with a 20-year-old digital camera. They're going to go out there with a brand new one, and it's going to help if their brand new camera has the latest bells and whistles, right? Because the colors are going to be really nice and saturated. The image is going to be super sharp, right? The megapixels are going to be high so they can crop. And if it's a good camera, dynamic range is good, so they can get, even on a basic computer with basic software, up the brightness and it's going to look good, right? Whereas me, if I'm shooting as an experienced photographer with an older camera, it's going to help me to have a really good software, and I can, again, level the playing field with software, right? So software is another reason why experienced photographers can level that playing field, and why a beginner without that knowledge is just going to need a better camera. If you think about it, one last point here, beginners are now, and I say beginners, right? Many people that are starting out with photography today and have been doing it for maybe a year or two are using their phone, right, more than anything to edit their pictures now, right? And you can get professional software working on your phone, but for the most part they don't. They have an app, that even the one that comes with their phone, and they edit pictures really quick, right? You have all these filters you can do, digital filters, not glass filters. Digital filters you can up and lower and change, and you know, all these things you can play with, right? And it makes your pictures come out okay. So you don't even have to slide intensities and saturations. You can just pick different looks and you might end up with something you like. But again, it helps if the beginner starts with a really strong image. What's reason number 6? Well, reason number 6 is printing photos, right? Somebody who's been around a lot longer is going to print their photos. If a beginner decides that they want to get a nice printer and print some pictures so they can keep for family, right? Like in an album on a shelf, or they want to send their pictures out for printing. Either way, however you look at it, whether they print or the send out for printing, a beginner isn't going to have calibrated monitors, calibrated software. If they have a printer at home, it's probably not going to be, calibrated to their system. So there isn't any of that going on. So it's really, really important if their camera is just out of the box really good, right? Because the camera can compensate for some of that by putting it in certain settings. An older camera, if I'm shooting, and I've been shooting for a while, I can shoot with a 10 or 15-year-old camera. I'm not going to have the features that one of these really nice cameras has, but my monitor's calibrated, my printer's calibrated to my system, right? My software's calibrated to my computer and to the printer. I know the settings that I need to pick, right? I've been struggling with that lately because I'm experimenting again, and my friend, which just moved from New York to San Francisco, is helping me. I'm kind of trying to get in the middle here. So, this is what an experienced person plays with and what we learn and what we get better at, right? And we've been doing it for a while. I used to do it a lot, and then I dropped it. So now I'm trying to get back into it, and the software has changed, right? So I'm trying to get warmed up to it again. But I'm getting comfortable with it again, right? So if I'm going to print my pictures, whether it's at Walmart or Target or wherever, right, where the drugstores, or I want to print them at home, my system is just going to be better calibrated. So it's less important for me to have a fantastic camera. But for a beginner, it's going to be really important that that camera out of the box has the ability to just give you good results. Now, I'm not saying that the good camera alone is going to give you good printing results. You still have to kind of know what to do, right? But the good camera, the really good camera, is going to be more important for the beginner in this case than it is for the pro. The experienced photographer will benefit from a great camera, no doubt, right? My Fuji is sitting behind me on a shelf, and it's 102 megapixels. And yes, the color science, the dynamic range, the megapixels, the resolution, everything that camera has, I'm going to go out and take a picture. And then with everything calibrated, of course my pictures are going to be better than a 20-year-old camera with everything calibrated. But my point is, if I have a really good camera and I have a 20-year-old camera, the difference is not as big as if a beginner has a new camera and a 20-year-old camera. For them, it's going to be a difference. Number 7, and the last point today, is understanding of photography basics, right? An experienced photographer is just going to have a much better understanding of the basics of photography, or photography basics, right? However you look at it. And it's going to help squeeze all of the technology out of an older camera, whereas a new person doesn't have that really deep understanding. And they're just going to either put it on manual and struggle a little bit, or they're going to put it on automatic and just worry about composition and, basic things, right? But that's where the experienced photographer knows the basics. I can take a lens that isn't a very fast lens, right? Maybe a 2.8 instead of like a 1.8 or a 1.4 or a 1.2. And I can take that lens, and depending on how I use it, I can still get a really shallow depth of field in my portraits. Especially if it's a zoom lens, I'm going to zoom in a little more. I'm going to get as close as I can to my subject, and I'm going to, make that bokeh look a little better. Whereas a new person might shoot a wider shot, right? They're not going to know the settings on the lens to put it in, and the bokeh is just not going to be there if that's what they're looking for, right? So that's where experience comes in, and knowing the basics down to the core, right? When you know the basics cold, you're not even thinking about them anymore, right? They just, you know what you want, right? And that's the first thing an experienced photographer will ask themselves when they pick up a camera. If I'm picking this up and I'm looking at you and you're my model, the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, what do I want from this shot? Is it depth of field shallowness, the good bokeh, the soft bokeh? Is it sharp end to end, including some of the background? Do I want specific lighting? What do I want, right? Special effects? Do I need some filters? First question, always. And then I adjust according to that, and then I take my picture. A beginner is going to take the picture, and then they're going to look at it, and then they're going to go, I don't know, for some reason, it's okay, but it could be better. I just not sure what to do to make it better, right? So those are the differences, right? And when you know the basics really well, those are things you don't have to think about. Which is why, being a beginner, I want a camera with really, really good automatic AI, artificial intelligence built in, because the camera is going to even many times recommend where to point. It looks at the scene and it says, hey, if you raise this camera a little more, you get a better shot. I don't always agree. I have, the phone does that sometimes, right? It'll recommend like move over to the left or move over to the right. I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing. I don't want the stupid thing that I'm photographing to be smack in the center. I want it off to the side, right? So I ignore that. But that helps many people that are starting out because it takes some of the guesswork away. So we're done with the 7 points. Does it make it terrible to be a beginner? Am I a loser because I'm a beginner? No. That's not even the point here, right? I think anybody that's been following this channel knows I would never knock that. We all have to start somewhere. And I want to show you something really cool. This is my first film camera. I was 11 years old and I lost this camera. This is a Vivitar. I believe this particular model is the 603, Tele 603. Let's see if I can get you to see that. See that cool thing? Isn't that beautiful? The flash doesn't work, it's a 110, because, you know, flash is one of the things that goes, because it's built into the camera, and old flashes die, that's what they do, those bulbs don't make it. So I was okay that the flash didn't work. Look, a little door opens, right, you put your film in there. So I got this off of Etsy, I think, yes. And I went looking for my old camera because when I was 11 years old, I got this as a gift, and it opened my world to photography. And I was taking pictures of my brothers and my family and everything at home and plants on the street. And my parents didn't have a lot of money, right? So they found it a little difficult to support my film habit. And one day, you know, I put the camera down probably for the winter. I did some really nice pictures that winter with snow, right? I say nice, but they were just regular pictures. I was a kid, and just somewhere along the way, the camera disappeared. And I understand why. I don't blame anybody for that. The same parents that took my camera because they couldn't afford to develop all the film, gave me a professional Canon F1 in 1984 when I graduated from high school. Now you know how old I am. And so that's really what set my heart into photography deeply, right? But they were the ones that got me this camera as well. So I went looking for it, and it works. This is completely operational, like I said, except a flash. So I can use this in daytime, right? And I'm going to put a film through this, and I'm going to make a video, and I'm going to call it my first camera. And I just wanted to show you, right? See, isn't that cool, right? And my point is, we all start from somewhere. This was my beginning. This is my humble beginning, right? What a beautiful little camera. I don't even know what this cost back then. I paid $23 for this. Can you believe that? And I think it was free shipping. It doesn't get any better. You can get some really cool stuff, right? So if you started with an old camera way back or whatever, see if you can find it. It'd be nice, right? This is very inspirational to me. I want to keep this around my desk just to remind me the power of simplicity, the power that the little things have in life to change the direction of our life, right? The course of our life. This changed my life. I'm doing YouTube videos on photography. I have a book that's about to come out. I have, a web page that's about to launch. I have photography that I sell. I'm excited, right? So beginners, nothing wrong with being a beginner. Don't knock yourself. If you're a beginner and you're watching this is not about knocking you. You have to start somewhere. So just stay focused, right? Get the best camera you can buy for the money. I know that money was an issue for me starting out, like I just told you. So get the best camera you can buy. Don't worry. By getting the best camera you can afford. And by the way, remember that you can get used, right? You can get like a 4 or 5 year camera. This camera is from the 80s. And this is a recent acquisition of mine, right? This is a beautifully working camera. I took pictures with it. I hate that I put the same pictures in every video. I'm going to put them here now. And you can take a look at these because I haven't shot much with it. I've only shot one roll of black and white and one roll of color, but you can see these pictures and how beautiful they are, right? This camera is phenomenal, and you know, there's nothing wrong with it. So and this is from the 80s, right? We're talking a long way back, right? At least 40 years back. So, well, yeah, 35 years, 30 to 40 years, right? Depending on where in the 80s you buy it, right? When it was made. But you can get a really nice 5-year-old camera that was really good 5 years ago, right? In terms of the specs, and it's going to be a wonderful camera for you if you're starting out. So don't hesitate, keh.com. And I'll link it below as well, is a great place. There are others, mpb.com. There's a whole bunch of places that sell really good used gear. And I say really good, they also have crappy stuff, but they rate their stuff very conservatively. So when they say it's good, it's fantastic. It's not even good. I just got something that was in bargain condition, which you figure, oh, bargain? And I got the lens and I looked at it. Do I have it here? I took it upstairs finally. I looked at it for 5 minutes. I don't know how you rate this thing bargain. It looked like it was almost new. So really conservative ratings. You want to get yourself something used. That way, my point is here, when you get the best camera you can get, it makes life easier for you because you don't have to worry about megapixels, color, science, all these other things, dynamic range. You just put the camera on automatic and you can focus on things, no pun intended, like composition, like learning where to look, right? Shoot the big picture that everybody's shooting when they come off the bus, and then ask yourself, is there something I can do differently here, right? That's where you start challenging yourself. And then you get better and better, and then you move on to other cameras, right? But buying the best camera you can buy is going to make all that easier for you so you can just focus on the simple things for now. Ironically speaking, as we just mentioned, an experienced photographer can squeeze some beautiful pictures out of older gear, right? And experienced photographers are the ones that end up spending all their money on new gear, which is kind of ironic, right? Because they don't need it, really. They can make this other stuff they have work, but at that point, it's all about the toys, right? And how many things you can buy that do different things, right? I already have a lens that shoots something similar, but this one has macro, or this one has, it's just a faster lens, or, you know, so you start buying all these cool things to experiment, and yes, it's called GAS, Gear Acquisition Syndrome, and I am guilty. Conclusion. It is my belief, and it actually was Alicia's belief, like I mentioned early in the video. It was Alicia's belief first that a really good camera is going to be more important for a beginner than it is for an experienced photographer or a pro, right? I think, I made some points here. Let me know if you agree. You might disagree. You might disagree with all of them. You might disagree with some of them, right? Maybe you don't. Maybe you agree fully. Whatever it is, let me know what you think. Let me know what's happening to you right now in your world. Are you just starting out? Have you been shooting? And how important is a really good camera to you? I'm shooting film again, you know? You go back to there's a story of the legendary samurai. Is it Miyamoto Musashi or something? I forget the name. But he was so good with metal swords, he started resorting to sticks because he was winning all his battles so easily, right? He went back to sticks, and his opponents would get so angry that he would show up to fight with a stick that they would let anger take over, and then they would lose to him even though he was fighting with a stick. So I feel like I've been shooting for such a long time, and I've been shooting digital going on 20 years at the beginning of 2023, depending on when you're watching this video. It may be more than that. So I'm getting really, really warm and fuzzies shooting film again. I love shooting film, as you saw the pictures I showed you. I'm gonna shoot every camera that I'm buying because I'm collecting film cameras. Every camera that I buy, including this little guy, I'm going to shoot film through them as long as the film is made or I can find it. Even secondhand old expired film, people do that. That's a cool thing to do. I'm gonna shoot film through everything, and I'm gonna do a review of those cameras in case anybody's looking to buy one, right? So I'm excited. I can't wait to shoot more film, and I plan to take really good pictures. I don't plan to take less good pictures, right? Just because I'm shooting an older camera. I plan to take the best pictures I've ever taken, whether it's an older digital camera or an old film camera, whatever it is, right? And if I'm shooting my new Fuji, then yeah, they better come out really good, right? I gotta push myself. So thank you very much for your time. always, from the bottom of my heart, I love you guys. I love that you spend time with me here. I hope to learn from your feedback and your comments. Please supply some. I love to listen, I love to read, and I love to respond. So take care of yourselves. This is the holiday season. Please be careful. Watch yourselves out there. Take care of yourselves and your family. Have a wonderful holiday, and I'll see you soon. Ciao for now.